They sent a human into the apex predator's lair. She returned with a pack of fierce protectors. The pale blue holographic display flickered across the faces of 17 different species as their representatives leaned forward in the amphitheater-like chamber. Tension thickened the recycled air of the consortium xenoscience chamber, where the emergency session had stretched into its fourth hour. The Volari delegate's breathing apparatus wheezed loudly in the silence that followed Director Solin's announcement. 20 specialists, lost. The director's voice, though, translated through the neural interface, carried a weight that transcended species barriers. The finest xenobiologists and field experts from across 7 systems, and not one transmission since they breached the outer marsh regions. Dr. Mara Keene sat quietly in the human observation section, her dark eyes absorbing every nuance of the increasingly heated debate. Her presence had been requested, though. Until now, no one had acknowledged her. She understood why. Humans were among the newest additions to the consortium, barely a century since first contact, and were still viewed with a mixture of fascination and dismissal by the older species. The Nexus 12 mining operation had been profitable beyond projections until the attacks began 3 standard months ago. What initially appeared to be territorial displays from local fauna had escalated into coordinated assaults that demonstrated unsettling precision. The mining equipment worth billions in universal currency sat idle, guarded by defensive shields that drained power at an unsustainable rate. The apex predators of Nexus 12 have adapted to our presence far more rapidly than anticipated, continued Solin, his elongated fingers manipulating the holographic display to show footage of shadowy, 4-limbed creatures moving with shocking speed through bioluminescent undergrowth. They've neutralized every defensive measure we've implemented. Then, we escalate to lethal protocols, insisted the Thracian representative mandibles, clicking in agitation. We cannot allow primitive life forms to impede resource acquisition. Mara felt her jaw tighten. This was precisely the kind of response that had drawn her to xenobiology, the quick dismissal of unfamiliar life as primitive, the rush to dominance rather than understanding. Her specialty in predator behavior had taken her to the most dangerous environments on 24 worlds. But what truly distinguished her work was her immersive methodology. Where others observed from safety, Mara lived alongside her subjects. The Thracian proposal is ecologically unsound, countered the Myconian delegate, their transparent cranium pulsing with neural activity. Nexus 12's biodiversity models indicate a highly integrated ecosystem. Mass elimination of apex species would trigger cascading failures. And yet we cannot continue to lose specialists, Solin said finally, turning toward Mara. Which brings us to our human observer. Dr. Keene, your reputation precedes you. I understand you've embedded with predator species across multiple biospheres. All 17 delegates turned to regard her with compound eyes, sensory tendrils, and optical receptors of various configurations. Mara rose to her feet, standing tall, despite the subtle tremor in her legs. At 38, she was mid-career by human standards, but painfully young in this assembly of long-lived species. I've lived among apex predators on 26 worlds, she stated simply, including the ice wolves of Europa and the neurothresh of Barnard's Star B, both previously classified as unassailable. And yet you remain intact, observed Solin, a note of genuine curiosity in his tone. How? By approaching them with respect rather than fear. By learning their communication methods rather than imposing our own. By recognizing intelligence, even when it doesn't match our definitions. Mara advanced to the central platform, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet chamber. The creatures you're calling primitive have systematically disabled mining equipment worth more than some planetary GDPs. That's not aggression. It's communication. A rustle of discomfort moved through the delegates. The Vestan representatives' chromatophores flushed deep crimson anger if Mara recalled their emotional signaling correctly. You suggest we negotiate with animals, the Vestan demanded. I suggest we consider the possibility that they are more than animals, Mara countered, pulling up her own file on the central display. Your scans show developed frontal cortices, complex social structures, and tool usage. Those aren't just predator traits, they're pre-sapient indicators. Director Solin's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, his species equivalent of contemplative thought. You're proposing a solo mission, he stated, rather than asked. A single human observer presents less threat than a research team. I can establish contact, assess their intelligence level, and potentially negotiate access to mining zones away from their territories. Absolutely not, the Thracian delegate chittered. Sending another specialist into that death zone is the most resource-efficient option on the table, Mara interrupted. Your mining operation has been stalled for 3 months. Every other attempt has failed. What do you have to lose except one expendable human? Her last words hung in the air like a challenge. She knew how most of the consortium viewed humanity, an upstart species, whose only real value was their adaptability and willingness to take risks others considered foolish. She was playing to their prejudices, but for the right reasons. After 17 minutes of heated debate, during which Mara stood silently at the center, the vote was taken. By a narrow margin, her proposal was approved. Director Solin approached her afterward, his nearly 8-foot frame looming over her. You have 2 standard weeks, Dr. Keene. If we receive no communication by then, we will implement the Thracian protocols and sterilize the primary territories. Mara nodded once sharply. I understand. I don't think you do, Solin added his vocal modulator, dropping to a lower register. The consortium values Nexus 12's resources more than it values xenobiological discoveries or human lives. This mission is a formality before the inevitable. Mara met his compound gaze without flinching. 2 weeks is all I need. Deep in the administrative bowels of the consortium station, an AI calculated her survival odds at 15.2%. The starship, Resolute Inquiry, vibrated beneath Mara's feet as it prepared for atmospheric descent. Through the observation port, Nexus 12 dominated the view, swirling violet storm systems, traversing its upper atmosphere patches of bioluminescent marshland, visible even from orbit, like constellations against the darker continental masses. Final systems check complete, Dr. Keene, announced Alcor, the ship's artificial intelligence. I must once again register my assessment that this mission has a high probability of failure. Your objection is noted, Mara replied, adjusting the final seals on her adaptive environment suit. The material felt cool against her skin, the nanofabric designed to regulate temperature and provide limited camouflage capabilities. I have completed analysis of all available predator data. Alcor continued, projecting images of the creatures onto the cabin wall. The most concerning aspect is their rapid adaptation rate. The first mining teams reported minimal wildlife interference. By week 6, the predators had developed coordinated hunting patterns, specifically targeting human operators. Mara studied the blurry images captured from drone surveillance. The creatures moved on 4 powerful limbs, though several frames showed them rising onto their hind legs to manipulate objects. Their bodies appeared to blend with the bioluminescent environment, suggesting either natural camouflage or possibly some form of tech mimicry, a rare but documented trait in highly evolved species. They're learning, she murmured more to herself than Alcor. That's why the defensive measures failed. Each new barrier became an intelligence test. A concerning framing, Alcor noted. If correct, your survival odds decreased to 12.7%. Mara allowed herself a small smile. You know why I volunteered for this, don't you? Your psychological profile indicates a 94% likelihood that you calculated the Thracian protocol would be implemented regardless of your intervention. You are attempting to prevent ecological destruction by proving the predator's intelligence. And that's why I keep you around, Alcor. You understand me. I am programmed to understand human motivation, Dr. Keene. Understanding does not equate to agreement. Your approach remains high risk with questionable probability of success. The ship shuddered as it hit the outer atmosphere friction heat blooming across the hull's shielding. Probably, Mara conceded, securing her equipment into the drop pod that would deliver her to the surface. But I've beaten worse odds before. Your medical records indicate you have not in fact faced statistical probabilities below 16.3% survival in previous field engagements. She laughed then, the sound echoing in the metal confines of the preparation chamber. Alcor, sometimes I think you developed a sense of humor despite your programming. That would be a malfunction requiring immediate diagnostic review. Of course it would. She sealed the last of her supplies, enough for 20 standard days if strictly rationed. Begin landing sequence and prepare the drop pod. I want to reach the surface before local sunset. Acknowledged. Atmospheric conditions are suboptimal. Preparing compensatory descent calculations. As the ship punched through the storm layer, violent turbulence threw Mara against the restraint harness. The brilliant flashes of electrical discharge illuminated the cabin in stark blues and violets. Pod separation in 15 seconds. Alcor announced, its voice perfectly level, despite the ship's growing instability. Dr. Keene, while regulations prohibit expressing personal sentiment, I am authorized to wish you good luck. Mara tightened her harness. I'll take whatever luck I can get. The pod detached with a pneumatic hiss, and for a moment, there was perfect stillness before gravity claimed her. The descent was a controlled nightmare, buffeting winds, electrical interference that temporarily disabled her navigation system, and the growing pressure of Nexus 12's 1.3G environment, pressing her into the cushioned seat. Impact came suddenly. Despite the pod's absorption systems, Mara felt her teeth rattle, and a burst of pain shot up her spine. Warning lights flashed across the small cabin as external sensors registered the local atmosphere, breathable with filtration, but laden with compounds that would cause progressive respiratory damage without protection. She remained motionless for several minutes, allowing her body to adjust to the increased gravity while running through her mental preparation. When she finally triggered the pod's door release, a wave of humid air carried scents of vegetation and the unmistakable musk of large predators. Nexus 12's primary sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the marshland where her pod had landed. The bioluminescence she'd observed from orbit was now revealed in breathtaking detail. Patches of blue-green light pulsed in the vegetation like a heartbeat, while floating spores drifted through the air, trailing gossamer threads of purple luminescence. "Magnificent," she whispered, activating her recording equipment with a subtle eye movement. The heads-up display inside her helmet began cataloging atmospheric components and biochemical signatures. Mara established her perimeter camp with methodical efficiency, setting up the minimal shelter, environmental sensors, and communication relay that would allow intermittent contact with resolute inquiry in orbit. The increased gravity made every movement an effort, but her pre-mission conditioning had prepared her for this particular challenge. By the time darkness fully enveloped the landscape, she had secured her position and activated the passive defense field, not strong enough to harm approaching creatures, but sufficient to alert her to their presence. She didn't have to wait long. The first indication came as a subtle change in the bioluminescent patterns. What had appeared random now shifted pulses of light, moving in coordinated waves toward a section of dense vegetation, approximately 30 meters from her position. Mara dimmed her external lights and activated her suit's enhanced vision, watching as a shadow detached itself from the darkness. The creature moved with liquid grace despite its substantial size, easily 2 meters at the shoulder, with a body mass she estimated at over 300 kilograms. Its 4 limbs ended in what appeared to be retractable claws, currently extended to navigate the soft marshland. But it was the creature's head that captured her full attention, elongated and featuring multiple sensory organs, with eyes that reflected the bioluminescence like polished obsidian. Rather than charging her perimeter or testing the defensive field, the predator settled onto its haunches, just beyond sensor range. It remained perfectly still, watching her shelter with what Mara could only interpret as deliberate assessment. "Hello there," she said softly, though her helmet would prevent the sound from carrying. "You're not what they think you are you?" The creature's head tilted slightly, as though responding to her movement, rather than her words. Then, with deliberate slowness, it raised one massive forelimb and pressed it into the soft ground, holding the position for several seconds, before retreating back into the vegetation. Mara waited until her sensors confirmed the predator had moved at least 100 meters away, before approaching the spot. There pressed into the marsh soil was a perfect impression of the creature's paw. 5 digits arranged in a pattern that could not be mistaken for anything but intentional communication. "First contact," she whispered to her recording system. "Subject has demonstrated awareness of observation and possible attempt at communication. I'm designating this individual Shadeclaw for tracking purposes." She returned to her shelter and spent the remainder of the night analyzing the recording and preparing for the next encounter. Sleep came in fitful bursts, her mind racing with possibilities. If these creatures were indeed pre-sapient, or even fully sapient, the consortium's mining operations represented more than an ecological threat. They were a potential first contact catastrophe. At dawn, Mara made her decision. Rather than waiting for Shadeclaw to return, she would track it to its territory. The standard protocols advised against such direct approach, but Mara had never achieved breakthroughs by following standard protocols. She loaded her pack with essential supplies, left the communication relay set to automatic transmission, and stepped beyond her defensive perimeter into the alien marsh. The impression Shadeclaw had left provided her first tracking point, and from there she followed the subtle signs of its passage: displaced vegetation, disrupted bioluminescent patterns, and occasional tracks in softer ground. The trail led deeper into the marsh, where the bioluminescence grew more intense and the vegetation more dense. Mara's suit adapted its camouflage in response, shifting hues to blend with the surroundings. The 1.3 g gravity turned what would have been a challenging hike into an endurance test, every step requiring conscious effort. By midday, the character of the landscape changed dramatically. The open marshland gave way to what appeared to be a geological feature, a massive mound rising from the wetlands, covered in the same bioluminescent growth, but structured with unmistakable patterns. "This isn't natural formation," Mara recorded, approaching cautiously. "The symmetry suggests either extremely unusual geological processes or deliberate construction." As she drew closer, openings became visible along the base of the mound tunnel entrances, approximately 2 meters in height, each pulsing with stronger bioluminescence from within. The entire structure resembled nothing so much as a massive communal den, or perhaps more accurately, a hive. For the first time since landing, Mara felt a flutter of genuine fear in her chest. If this was indeed a colony structure, she could be facing not just one intelligent predator, but an entire social group, potentially dozens or hundreds. The risk calculation shifted dramatically under such circumstances. Proceeding with elevated caution, she noted even as her training urged retreat. If this is a communal structure, it represents an extraordinary evolutionary development for a predator species. She selected what appeared to be a less used entrance, based on the reduced signs of passage in the surrounding soil. The tunnel beyond was a marvel of biological engineering. The walls were lined with the same bioluminescent organisms that populated the marsh, but arranged in distinct patterns that provided consistent illumination. The interior was surprisingly dry, with a packed earthen floor that showed clear signs of regular use. Mara advanced slowly, her enhanced vision capturing every detail, while her suit sensors mapped the tunnel network. The passage descended at a gentle angle, branching occasionally into smaller corridors. She chose to follow the main path, which appeared to lead toward the center of the mound. After approximately 20 minutes of careful progress, she reached what could only be described as a chamber, a space perhaps 15 meters in diameter, with a domed ceiling, nearly 6 meters high at its apex. The entire surface pulsed with bioluminescence, casting the chamber in ethereal blue-green light that shifted in patterns too regular to be random. This is... Mara struggled to find appropriate terminology. This is architecture, deliberate design space. Before she could continue her assessment, a rumbling vibration passed through the structure. Dust and small fragments began to fall from the ceiling as the vibration intensified into a full tremor. Mara's suit sensors flashed warnings, seismic activity increasing in magnitude. The tunnel entrance through which she had arrived collapsed in a shower of earth and root material. Mara lunged deeper into the chamber as more sections of ceiling gave way. She found herself pressed against the far wall as the main chamber entrance sealed with fallen debris. Emergency recording. She gasped into her system as the air filled with choking dust. Tunnel collapse, unknown cause. Multiple exits blocked. Oxygen level dropping as particulate matter increases. Her suit's filtration system struggled to process the dust-choked air. The display indicated environmental hazard, rising to critical levels, not immediately fatal, but potentially debilitating over prolonged exposure. Worse, her pack had been caught beneath a section of collapsed ceiling, limiting her access to supplies. Mara forced herself to remain calm to assess, rather than react. The chamber wasn't completely sealed. Air continued to move, suggesting at least one passage remained partially open. The bioluminescence, while dimmed by the dust, still functioned, providing minimal visibility. Using components from her damaged pack and sections of the strange root-like materials that formed part of the chamber structure, Mara improvised a support brace for the partially collapsed passage she had identified. It was crude engineering, but sufficient to create an opening large enough to crawl through. The passage beyond was tight, requiring her to remove her pack entirely and push it ahead of her as she crawled. The increased gravity made the effort excruciating, each movement a battle against both her environment and her own increasing exhaustion. After what felt like hours, but her suit clock registered as 47 minutes, Mara emerged into another chamber, smaller than the first but intact. She lay on the ground, allowing her suit to cycle clean air while she recovered from the exertion. A soft sound alerted her that she was not alone. Raising her head, she found herself less than 5 meters from Shadeclaw, the predator she had tracked from her landing site. In the confined space of the chamber, its size was even more impressive and intimidating. But Shadeclaw wasn't alone. Behind it, partially obscured by the predator's massive form, were 3 smaller versions of the creature juveniles. Mara realized with a jolt of both scientific excitement and primal fear. She had crawled directly into a maternal den. Before she could retreat or activate her suit's defensive measures, a cacophony of snarls and roars echoed through another passage leading into the chamber. Shadeclaw's posture immediately shifted, protective stance widening as the juveniles huddled behind. Through the other entrance burst 2 more of the predator species, but even at a glance, Mara could identify differences in coloration and marking patterns. These were not from Shadeclaw's social group, they were intruders. The lead intruder charged toward the juveniles without hesitation. Shadeclaw intercepted with explosive speed, and the 2 massive predators collided in a fury of claws and fangs. The second intruder circled clearly, seeking an opening to reach the vulnerable young. Mara's scientific objectivity warred with her human instinct to intervene. As the second predator lunged toward the juveniles, she made her decision. From her belt, she retrieved one of her emergency tools, a pheromone emitter, designed to calm agitated wildlife. It was calibrated for Earth species, but the underlying biochemistry of stress responses often translated across worlds. She activated the emitter at its highest setting and rolled it between the fighting predators. The effect wasn't immediate, but within seconds, the chemical release caused all the adult predators to pause, sensory organs flaring as they processed the unfamiliar scent. In that moment of confusion, Mara positioned herself between the juveniles and the intruders. It was either the bravest or most foolish decision of her career, But something in Shadeclaw's protective behavior had resonated with her on a level beyond scientific interest. The intruders recovered first, but their attack pattern changed. Rather than focusing on the juveniles, they now oriented toward Mara, the unknown element, the new threat. Shadeclaw, however, moved to stand beside her, creating a unified defensive line protecting the young. What happened next would fundamentally alter Mara's understanding of Nexus 12's apex predators. As the lead intruder prepared to charge again, Shadeclaw emitted a complex series of vocalizations unlike anything Mara had recorded previously. Simultaneously, the bioluminescent patterns on the chamber walls pulsed in synchronized sequences. The intruders hesitated, their own sensory organs tracking the light patterns. After a tense moment, they backed slowly toward the entrance tunnel, never taking their attention from Mara and Shadeclaw until they disappeared from view. "They communicate through bioluminescence," Mara whispered in awe, her recording system capturing the fading light patterns. The vocalizations might be emotional expression, but the actual language is visual. Shadeclaw just talked them down. She turned slowly toward her unexpected ally, maintaining a non-threatening posture. Shadeclaw regarded her with those obsidian eyes, then deliberately touched one claw tip to the chamber wall. The bioluminescence responded, forming patterns that flowed across the surface like liquid light. "You're trying to communicate with me," Mara realized, "and I have absolutely no idea how to respond." One of the juveniles chirped softly and took a hesitant step toward her. Shadeclaw made no move to prevent the approach, which Mara interpreted as permission or perhaps a test. The young predator sniffed at her suit, particularly interested in her supply pack. With careful movements, Mara unsealed a compartment and removed her water container. The liquid inside was mixed with electrolytes and mild antibacterial agents, safe for her. But she had no idea how it might affect the planet's native life. Nevertheless, she poured a small amount into her palm and offered it to the curious juvenile. The young predator's sensory appendages fluttered as it examined the offering, then extended a surprisingly delicate tongue to taste the water. Its reaction was immediate, a chirp of what seemed to be pleasure, followed by eager lapping of the liquid. Shadeclaw watched this interaction closely, then approached and lightly touched the juvenile's back, guiding it away from Mara. The adult predator's gaze remained fixed on her, but the aggressive tension had completely dissipated from its posture. "I think we just established trust," Mara recorded quietly. "Cross-species peaceful contact confirmed." Over the next several hours, Mara remained in the chamber, observing the family group, while attempting to decipher their bioluminescent communication. Her suit's systems recorded the light patterns, beginning to identify recurring sequences that might represent specific meanings. When Shadeclaw eventually rose and moved toward one of the tunnels, the clear expectation was for Mara to follow. She gathered her supplies and did so, marveling at how quickly her situation had transformed from potential predator-prey dynamics to something approaching cooperative interaction. The tunnel led deeper into the mound structure, connecting to increasingly larger chambers populated by more of the predator species. Mara counted at least 30 individuals of varying ages, all of whom reacted to her presence with initial alarm, followed by cautious acceptance when they observed Shadeclaw's relaxed demeanor. "I'm being introduced to the social group," she noted for her records. Their acceptance suggests either advanced social cognition or deference to Shadeclaw's authority, possibly both. The journey culminated in the largest chamber yet, easily 100 meters across, with a ceiling so high that the bioluminescence couldn't fully illuminate it. But what dominated the space wasn't its size, it was what occupied its center. Rising from the chamber floor was a massive biological structure that defied easy classification. It resembled a cross between a giant fungal formation and a coral reef pulsing with bioluminescence, far more intense than anything Mara had yet encountered. Tube-like protrusions extended from its surface, releasing visible spores that drifted through the air, carrying luminescent particles throughout the chamber. "This is..." Mara struggled to process what she was seeing. This appears to be a central biological hub, perhaps the source of the bioluminescent organisms throughout the region. Shadeclaw led her to the edge of the structure, then used one claw to carefully extract a small nodule from its surface. The action was performed with surgical precision, avoiding damage to the surrounding tissue. The nodule continued to pulse with light, even after removal, suggesting it remained viable. With deliberate movements, Shadeclaw placed the nodule in Mara's hand. It felt warm and slightly vibrated against her palm, almost like a heartbeat. "I think this is a gift," Mara said softly. "Or perhaps a demonstration." As she studied the nodule, her suit's sensors began recording unprecedented energy readings. The small sample contained power output, comparable to advanced battery technology, generated through what appeared to be purely biological processes. Suddenly, the pattern of the predator's behavior made perfect sense. "It's the mining," she whispered, the realization dawning with shocking clarity. "The consortium isn't just extracting resources, they're damaging this heart node. The entire ecosystem is connected through these bioluminescent networks. The predators aren't being territorial. They're protecting a critical biological infrastructure." Shadeclaw watched her intently, those intelligent eyes seemingly gauging her comprehension. The bioluminescent patterns around them shifted, forming what Mara now recognized as a complex communication display. Other predators gathered, creating a semicircle as they contributed to the light language washing across the chamber walls. Drawing on her experience with communication barriers across species, Mara attempted to respond. She activated her suit's external lighting system, programming a simplified mimicry of the patterns she had observed. The result was crude compared to the predator's nuanced expressions, but it represented her best effort at acknowledging their attempt to communicate. The effect on the gathered predators was immediate. The chamber erupted in light patterns and vocalizations that Mara interpreted as excitement. Several of the younger predators bounded forward, their own bioluminescent markings, which she now noticed were distinct to each individual, pulsing rapidly. "I think I just said something significant," she recorded, "though I have absolutely no idea what." Over the next several hours, a rudimentary communication system developed between Mara and the predators. Using a combination of physical gestures, light patterns, and even shared tactile experiences, she began to grasp fundamental concepts. The predators seemed equally determined to understand her, displaying problem-solving abilities and adaptive learning that confirmed Mara's assessment of their intelligence. The central revelation was the heart node's importance. Through careful observation and experimental communication, Mara determined that the structure was essential to the planet's ecosystem, a biological processor that maintained the bioluminescent network spanning thousands of square kilometers. The nodules Shadeclaw had shown her were like seeds or distribution points used to expand and repair the network. The consortium's mining operation had inadvertently targeted a region rich with these nodules, mistaking their energy signatures for valuable mineral deposits. Each extraction damaged the network, triggering the predator's protective response. "They're not just apex predators," Mara recorded watching, as Shadeclaw demonstrated how the nodules were carefully planted in specific locations throughout the tunnel system. "They're ecosystem engineers, gardeners, caretakers." When exhaustion finally overcame her, Mara established a small sleeping area in the chamber, trusting that she had built sufficient rapport with the predators to rest safely in their presence. Shadeclaw remained nearby, apparently assuming a protective role. She awoke to alarm vocalizations echoing through the chamber. The predators moved with urgent purpose, several racing down tunnels, while others gathered the youngest members of the group. Shadeclaw approached Mara, agitation evident in its movements. "Something's wrong," Mara stated the obvious, as she quickly gathered her equipment. Following Shadeclaw through a series of tunnels, they emerged onto a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of marshland, and there, moving inexorably through the terrain, was a consortium mining crawler. The massive machine cut a swath through the bioluminescent vegetation, its sampling probes extending to extract core samples from the soil. Each extraction point left a dark patch, where the bioluminescence died, like wounds in living tissue. They've moved up the timeline, Mara realized with horror. They're not waiting for my 2-week assessment. Shadeclaw and several other predators took offensive postures, clearly preparing to attack the crawler, despite its obviously superior destructive capability. The machine was equipped with defensive measures that had already neutralized previous predator assaults. Attempting another direct confrontation would result in casualties. "Wait," Mara called out, using both verbal and the rudimentary light signals she had learned. To her amazement, the predators hesitated, looking to her with what could only be described as expectation. In that moment, Mara made a decision that would either salvage her mission or destroy her career, possibly both. She activated her emergency transmitter, reconfiguring it to broadcast on the crawler's operation frequency. "This is Dr. Mara Keen Consortium, Xenobiological Consultant," she transmitted. "Cease mining operations immediately. You are damaging critical biological infrastructure." The crawler continued its advance, either not receiving her transmission or ignoring it. Mara switched tactics, accessing the transmitter's core programming and crafting an emergency shutdown sequence disguised as a critical system update. "Remote system vulnerability identified," she broadcast. "Initiating emergency security protocol." The transmitted code package was relatively simple, a cascading failure designed to trigger the crawler's self-preservation protocols, rather than cause permanent damage. It was the kind of hack that would get her banned from consortium operations if discovered, but, if successful, would buy precious time. The crawler's progress slowed, then halted, as its systems processed the unexpected input. Warning lights flashed across its external hull as the defensive shields powered down to preserve core functions. In that moment of vulnerability, something unexpected happened. From the opposite side of the marsh emerged another group of predators, the rivals who had attempted to attack Shadeclaw's juveniles. Rather than taking advantage of the distraction to renew their territorial dispute, they took position alongside Shadeclaw's group, forming a unified defensive line against the crawler. "They're cooperating," Mara recorded in amazement. Distinct social groups united against a common threat. The combined predator groups surrounded the disabled crawler, but made no move to attack. Instead, they began a coordinated light display more complex than anything Mara had yet witnessed. The bioluminescence spread beyond their bodies, connecting with the patterns in the marshland itself, until the entire visible landscape pulsed in unified rhythm. The effect was both beautiful and unmistakable in its message. "This place is alive. This place is ours." Mara's transmitter chimed with an incoming communication. "Dr. Keen, this is Supervisor Vex on Mining Crawler Alpha 7. What the hell did you do to our systems?" "I protected you from making a catastrophic mistake," she responded, approaching the crawler with Shadeclaw by her side. "The energy signatures you're detecting aren't mineral deposits. They're biological infrastructure. Living technology." "That's impossible," the supervisor scoffed. "Our scans show—" "Your scans show what you expected to find," Mara interrupted. "You're looking at the most sophisticated biological network I've ever encountered, and you're treating it like a mining claim." She reached the crawler's access hatch, the predators forming an escort that must have appeared terrifying to those inside. "I'm coming aboard to show you what I've discovered, and I'm bringing some new friends who would like to discuss alternative arrangements." The journey back to the consortium station was unprecedented in more ways than Mara could count. The shuttle bay, designed to accommodate various alien physiologies, had never been prepared for the arrival of 4 apex predators from Nexus 12. Security protocols were activated, defensive barriers erected, and no fewer than 3 emergency sessions of the Xenological Ethics Committee convened before Shadeclaw, and 3 other predator representatives were permitted to enter the main concourse. The reaction among the station's diverse population ranged from terror to fascination. Many quarters were hastily vacated along the designated path to the main assembly chamber, while braver or more foolish individuals pressed against safety barriers for a glimpse of the visitors. Mara walked alongside Shadeclaw, now adorned with markers identifying it as a diplomatic guest, rather than a research subject, a distinction she had insisted upon. The Predator moved with dignified purpose, seemingly unperturbed by the alien environment or the stares of countless species. Director Solon awaited them in the assembly chamber, flanked by security officers and representatives from each major consortium faction. His expression, as the Predators entered, was a study in conflicting emotions, administrative concern, warring with genuine scientific curiosity. Dr. Keene, he greeted her formally. Your communication was unexpected, as is your choice of company. Director, Mara acknowledged. May I present Shadeclaw, primary guardian of the Southern Heart node of Nexus 12, along with representatives from 3 neighboring territories. The formal introduction, delivered as though addressing fellow diplomats, rather than research subjects, sent a ripple of discomfort through the assembled officials. The Thracian delegates' mandibles clicked rapidly, in what Mara recognized as agitation. This is preposterous, the Thracian declared. You were sent to assess threat levels, not to import dangerous wildlife into a civilian station. Shadeclaw's attention shifted to the Thracian obsidian eyes, fixing on the insectoid delegate with unsettling focus. Then, with deliberate movements, Shadeclaw approached the central display platform. Using the claws of one forelimb with surgeon-like precision, the Predator activated the holographic interface. Shocked silence fell across the chamber as Shadeclaw manipulated the controls with obvious purpose and understanding. The display responded, projecting a 3-dimensional map of Nexus 12 with glowing points, highlighting specific regions. As you can see, Mara stepped forward, assuming the role of translator. They are not only intelligent, but technologically adept in their own biological framework. What Shadeclaw is showing you are sustainable harvest zones, areas where resource extraction can proceed without damaging the heart node network. One of the other Predators moved forward, depositing a collection of glowing nodules onto the display platform. Under the chamber's bright lights, the biological material pulsed with energy that registered clearly on the consortium's sensors. These are nodule samples freely given, Mara explained. Initial analysis suggests energy conversion efficiency exceeding our most advanced synthetic systems. The Predators, who call themselves the Lumina in their light language, are offering a trade agreement. Access to sustainable resource zones in exchange for protection of their biological infrastructure and recognition of their territorial sovereignty. Director Solon approached the platform, examining the nodules with genuine wonder. These are alive. They're components of a planet-wide biological network, Mara confirmed. The Lumina cultivate and protect this network as part of their evolutionary purpose. The energy signatures we detected as valuable mineral deposits are actually these nodules, biological batteries essentially. The Myconian delegate floated forward, transparent cranium pulsing with neural activity. If these biological mechanisms could be studied, replicated, the applications would be revolutionary. That's exactly what the Lumina are proposing, Mara said. A cooperative research initiative rather than destructive extraction. They understand concepts of trade and mutual benefit. They've been practicing them within their own territorial groups for generations. Over the next several hours, an unprecedented form of diplomacy unfolded in the consortium chamber. The Lumina, using a combination of light displays, holographic interface manipulation, and Mara's increasingly refined translation, presented a comprehensive proposal for coexistence. The resistance gradually gave way to cautious optimism as the economic advantages became clear. The biological technology the Lumina offered access to represented potential advances worth far more than raw mineral extraction, with the added benefit of sustainable harvesting rather than destructive mining. By the session's end, Director Solon authorized a provisional agreement, the first interspecies alliance between the consortium and a pre-technological sentient species. Mara was appointed official envoy, a position that would require her to divide her time between the consortium station and Nexus 12. I never imagined this outcome when we approved your mission, Dr. Keene, Solon admitted, as the formal proceedings concluded. You were sent to assess predators. You've returned with allies. Mara watched as Shadeclaw interacted with a group of xenobiologists, patiently allowing them to record its bioluminescent communication patterns. I didn't go looking for allies, Director. I simply approached them with respect rather than fear. A distinctly human approach, Solon observed. Perhaps we've underestimated your species' contribution to the consortium. 6 standard months later, Mara stood on a viewing platform overlooking the newly established research outpost on Nexus 12. The facility, designed with input from both consortium architects and Lumina territory guardians, blended seamlessly with the natural environment. Bioluminescent technology had been incorporated throughout the structure, reducing energy requirements by 64% compared to standard consortium installations. Below, a new group of researchers underwent orientation with Lumina guides. The communication protocols Mara had helped develop had evolved into a sophisticated translation system, allowing increasingly complex exchange of knowledge between species. The initial resource projections had been exceeded within the first quarter. The sustainable harvesting of nodules, coupled with the study of their biological energy conversion mechanisms, had yielded technologies now being implemented across 17 consortium worlds. More significantly, the Lumina had been formally recognized as a sentient species with territorial rights, the first such designation granted to a pre-technological civilization in consortium history. 3 Lumina representatives now held observer status in the Xenobiological Ethics Committee, with discussion of full membership under consideration. Shadeclaw, now bearing the formal title of Primary Ambassador, joined Mara on the platform. Over the months of close collaboration, their communication had developed a fluency that sometimes surprised even Mara. The translator she wore interpreted the Lumina's light patterns into verbal language, while her responses were converted to bioluminescent signals. The new conservators learned quickly, Shadeclaw commented, observing the orientation group. They understand the Heart Network's importance now. Knowledge leads to respect, Mara replied, and respect leads to protection. A wisdom your kind possesses that some older species have forgotten, the Lumina observed. To see value in difference rather than threat. A notification chimed on Mara's communication device. The latest survey results from the expanded research zone had been completed, revealing a heart node network nearly 3 times larger than initially estimated. The consortium's long-range planning committee had already adjusted development projections to incorporate this new understanding, prioritizing preservation alongside utilization. We've been invited to present at the Interspecies Cooperation Summit next month, Mara informed her companion. They're calling the Nexus 12 agreement a template for future first contact protocols. Shadeclaw's bioluminescent response translated as something between amusement and pride. They sent 1 human into our territory expecting conflict. Instead, they gained 1,000 allies and a new understanding of life itself. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is show respect to something everyone else fears, Mara replied, watching as the bioluminescent marsh pulsed with life beneath the setting sun. In the fading light, the boundaries between the research outpost and the natural environment seemed to dissolve, united by the flowing patterns of bioluminescence that connected everything on this remarkable world. What had begun as a desperate mission to prevent ecological destruction had transformed into something far more profound, a new paradigm of interspecies cooperation that would reshape the consortium's approach to life among the stars. And it had started with 1 human, willing to see intelligence, where others saw only threat to find communication, where others heard only growls to recognize protectors, where others labeled predators.